All right, think you really know American food? You're probably picturing burgers, fries, maybe some apple pie classic, comforting, maybe even a little predictable. But what if I told you there's a side to American cuisine so bizarre, so completely out there, that it sounds more like a work of fiction than something people actually eat? From state fairs to small-town diners, this country has given birth to some truly ridiculous, head-scratching, and absolutely unforgettable creations that defy all logic and sometimes even gravity. We're talking dishes with names you can't pronounce, ingredients that sound like they were pulled from a sci-fi novel, and combinations so wild you'll wonder who in the world ever thought they were a good idea. Get ready, because we're about to take a wild ride through 33 of the most unbelievable American food facts you'll ever hear. And yes, every single one of them is 100% real. This isn't just a list, it's a journey into the wonderfully weird heart of American eating, where creativity meets curiosity and sometimes just plain chaos. You'll discover foods that are legally protected, snacks that were invented by accident or desperation, and regional delicacies so specific you've probably never even heard of them until now. So whether you're a foodie, a trivia lover, or just someone who enjoys a good story, stick around. By the time we're done, you'll never look at your plate the same way again, and you'll have more than a few jaw-dropping facts to share at your next dinner party. Let's dive in. But to truly understand the weirdness of American food, we have to start with a modern legend, a sandwich that's become a masterclass in marketing mystery and culinary engineering, the McRib. Now, you might think it's just a barbecue-flavored pork patty on a bun, but the reality is so much stranger. This iconic item wasn't born from some family recipe or a chef's eureka moment. No, its origin story is pure, unadulterated American ingenuity driven by economics. In the late 1970s, McDonald's found itself with a massive surplus of pork shoulder, a cut that wasn't selling well. Their solution: grind it all up, mold it into a shape that vaguely resembles a rack of ribs, a shape that's entirely for show, by the way, as those little lines are completely cosmetic. Slather it in tangy sauce, pile on pickles and onions, and voila. The McRib was invented not to satisfy a culinary craving, but to solve a warehouse problem. And that's only half the bizarre story. The McRib's infamous disappearing act, its limited time only status that sends fans into a frenzy every time it reappears, is a deliberate and brilliantly calculated strategy. This isn't about the availability of ingredients or the seasons changing. It's a psychological play. By making the sandwich vanish for months or even years at a time, McDonald's manufactures a powerful sense of artificial scarcity and nostalgia. Its return is treated not as a menu update, but as a major event covered by news outlets and celebrated on social media. This cycle of absence and revival creates a level of hype and demand that a permanently available sandwich could never achieve. It transforms a simple processed food item into an object of obsession, a culinary ghost that haunts the drive-thru, making its brief, calculated appearances feel like a national holiday for its devoted followers. Now, if you thought the McRib was a triumph of food engineering, wait until you hear the shocking truth about a staple found in millions of American refrigerators. That classic, meltable, individually wrapped slice you probably put on a burger, it's living a lie. You see, in the United States, the term cheese isn't just a word, it's a legally defined standard set by the Food and Drug Administration. And according to the FDA's strict standard of identity, most of what we call American cheese doesn't actually qualify as real cheese. So what is it? The label tells the real story. If you know where to look, you'll often find it called pasteurized processed cheese food. That clunky, unappetizing name is a required admission of its true nature. To be called real cheese, a product must consist of at least 51% actual cheese. But this iconic slice frequently falls short of that mark, blending lesser amounts of cheeses like cheddar or Colby with a cocktail of other ingredients including milk, whey proteins, emulsifying salts, and various preservatives. Those emulsifiers, particularly sodium citrate, are the real magic trick. They're the reason this product melts into such an impossibly smooth, uniform blanket without ever seizing up or getting oily, a texture that real cheese can't replicate. This creation was actually born from a noble goal: to create a cheese with a longer shelf life that could be safely transported without refrigeration and distributed to soldiers during World War I. But that practical invention evolved into a cultural fixture, a product that occupies a unique category all its own. It's not cheese, but it's not cheese either. It's a cheese-adjacent product, a perfectly consistent, reliably melty slice that has carved out its own indispensable niche in the American culinary landscape. Legal definitions be damned. And speaking of foods born from wartime necessity that became cultural icons, nothing quite compares to the legacy of Spam, a product so deeply woven into the American fabric that it has its own shrine. That's right, in Austin, Minnesota, you can visit the Spam Museum, a 17,500 square foot temple dedicated entirely to the canned spiced ham and pork shoulder that has fed armies and inspired both devotion and parody for generations. This isn't just a simple corporate exhibit. It's a full-blown, interactive celebration of a product that transcended its humble tin to become a global phenomenon. From the moment you walk through the doors, you're greeted by a wall made of over 3,300 Spam cans and a towering, 13-foot-tall replica of the classic blue and yellow tin, setting the stage for an experience that is both deeply historical and wonderfully absurd. The museum meticulously charts Spam's incredible journey, beginning with its invention in 1937 as an affordable source of protein during the Great Depression. But its true claim to fame came during World War II, where it became an indispensable part of the Allied war effort. The U.S. government shipped over 100 million pounds of Spam to troops overseas because it was durable, non-perishable, and didn't require refrigeration. For soldiers, it was a taste of home, even if they grew tired of eating it every single day. This massive distribution is also how Spam became a culinary staple in places far from American shores, like Hawaii and parts of Asia and the Pacific Islands, where it remains a beloved ingredient in local cuisine to this day, a lasting edible artifact of the war. But the museum doesn't just focus on history, it leans into the sheer fun and quirky cultural impact of its subject. You can try your hand at canning on a mock assembly line, test your knowledge with Spam trivia, and explore exhibits that showcase the mind-boggling variety of flavors available around the world, from Spam with chocolate to Spam with garlic. There's even a section dedicated to the famous Monty Python sketch that cemented the product's place in pop culture by humorously depicting a cafe where every single dish contains Spam. And of course, no pilgrimage would be complete without a stop at the gift shop, where you can stock up on everything from Spam lip balm and t-shirts to keychains, and naturally every variety of Spam you could possibly imagine. It's a place that fully embraces its own silliness while paying sincere respect to a product that, for better or worse, truly helped shape modern history. If you thought a museum for Spam was the peak of American food marketing, prepare yourself for a promotional campaign that was truly out of this world, or at least out of this dimension. During the space race and the golden age of science fiction in the 1960s, Jell-O decided to tap into the nation's growing obsession with all things cerebral, psychological, and futuristic. Their brilliant, if not slightly unsettling, idea to offer consumers a free brain mold. That's right, for a few box tops and a little postage, any aspiring homemaker could receive a gelatin mold in the perfect shape of a human brain, ready to be filled with lime or cherry Jell-O and served at their next bridge club meeting or cocktail party. This wasn't just a random gag, it was a perfectly calculated move. psychology was booming, with everyone suddenly fascinated by Freud, the subconscious, and the untapped potential of the human mind. Science fiction was dominating movie theaters and bookshelves, exploring themes of intelligence, aliens, and what the future might hold. Jell-O brilliantly merged these two cultural currents into a single, wobbly, and utterly bizarre kitchen accessory. This brain mold represents the absolute peak of an entire era in American cooking, the age of the aspirational gelatin salad. For decades, molded Jell-O was not just a simple dessert for kids. It was a centerpiece, a symbol of a hostess's creativity and sophistication. Magazines and cookbooks of the time were filled with elaborate, towering creations that were more architecture than food. These dishes were complex works of art, layering gelatin with everything from shredded carrots and cabbage to chunks of tuna, hot dogs, and even entire olives. The goal was to surprise and delight guests, to show off one's culinary prowess by turning a simple powder into a shimmering, multi-colored spectacle. The brain mold was perhaps the ultimate expression of this trend, a conversation piece that was guaranteed to get a reaction, whether it was a gasp of amazement or a shudder of disbelief. It was food as theater, and for a brief, glorious moment, a quivering brain on a bed of lettuce was the height of dinner party chic. Now, if you thought a gelatin brain was a strange twist on a familiar food, wait until you hear about one of the greatest culinary identity crises of all time. We're heading to the West Coast for a food fact that seems to defy all logic. The iconic California roll, a staple of nearly every sushi restaurant across America, wasn't actually invented in California. That's right, this symbol of Pacific fusion cuisine was born just across the northern border in Vancouver, Canada. The story begins in the early 1970s with a Japanese chef named Hidekazu Tojo. Chef Tojo had recently immigrated to Vancouver and was trying to introduce traditional sushi to a local clientele that was, to put it mildly, deeply skeptical. At the time, the idea of eating raw fish was considered bizarre and even a little frightening to many North Americans. They were hesitant about the texture, the taste, and especially the concept of uncooked seafood. Chef Tojo faced a significant cultural barrier. He had a beautiful art form to share, but his potential customers were simply too wary to try it. His brilliant solution was an act of culinary diplomacy, a complete reinvention designed to ease people into the experience. He looked at the traditional ingredients and asked himself what local, familiar flavors could serve as a bridge. His two key substitutions were nothing short of genius. First, he replaced the fatty and often intimidating raw tuna with surimi, a mild, cooked imitation crab made from white fish that was much more approachable. Second, and perhaps most famously, he used creamy, rich avocado. This was a masterstroke, as avocado's texture remarkably mirrored the mouthfeel of toro, the prized fatty tuna belly, providing a similar luxurious experience without any of the hesitation around raw fish. But his most revolutionary change was to the roll's structure itself. In traditional sushi, the nori, or seaweed sheet, is on the outside. Chef Tojo knew the dark, leathery appearance of nori was another point of hesitation for new diners. So he turned the roll inside out, hiding the nori on the inside and coating the exterior with soft, neutral rice and a sprinkle of toasted sesame seeds or glistening roe. This created a visually familiar and appealing dish that didn't look intimidating in the slightest. He initially called his creation the Tojo Maki, but as its popularity soared and it traveled south across the border into the United States, it became universally known as the California roll, named for its use of avocado, a crop synonymous with the Golden State. This single roll didn't just become a menu item, it became a gateway drug for an entire nation. It gave millions of Americans the confidence to finally try sushi, providing a safe and delicious entry point. Once people fell in love with the California roll, they became curious about the other, more traditional items on the menu. It sparked a culinary revolution, paving the way for the sushi boom of the 1980s and 90s and transforming sushi from an obscure ethnic food into a mainstream American obsession. So the next time you pick up a tray of sushi at the grocery store or sit down at a restaurant, remember that you're enjoying a dish born from incredible creativity and cross-cultural understanding, a Canadian invention that forever changed the American palate. While Chef Tojo was using clever substitutions to overcome cultural barriers, the team at A&W restaurants ran headfirst into a completely different kind of obstacle, one that had nothing to do with taste and everything to do with the American education system. In the early 1980s, the chain was looking for a way to compete head-to-head with the booming quarter-pound burgers offered by giants like McDonald's. Their solution was pure, logical genius: offer a bigger, better burger at a competitive price. They launched the third-pound burger, a full third of a pound of beef, which is obviously larger than a quarter pound. It was a superior product made with fresh, never frozen beef, and it was priced right, offering customers more burger for their money. By every objective measure, it should have been a massive success, a home run that would have customers flocking to A&W. But instead, it became one of the most infamous case studies in marketing history, a spectacular failure that baffled the company's executives for months. The problem wasn't the burger's quality, its price, or its marketing. The problem was fractions. Despite being the larger burger, the third pounder was a complete sales disappointment. Desperate to understand why, A&W conducted extensive customer focus groups and market research. What they discovered was a level of mathematical confusion they never could have anticipated. A shocking number of customers reported that they actively avoided the third-pound burger because they believed they were being overcharged. These customers would look at the menu and see two options: the quarter-pounder from McDonald's for a certain price and the third-pounder from A&W for the same price or sometimes even slightly less. And in a catastrophic failure of basic math, a significant portion of the American public sincerely believed that 1/3 was smaller than 1/4. They saw the number 4 in quarter pound and the number 3 in third pound and concluded incorrectly that 4 is bigger than 3, so the competitor's burger must be the larger one. They thought A&W was trying to trick them into paying the same amount for less meat. This wasn't just a small segment of the population. The misunderstanding was widespread enough to single-handedly sink a national product launch. The company executives were stunned. They had fallen victim to a widespread issue of fraction illiteracy. They had made the perfectly reasonable assumption that consumers would understand that 1/3 is greater than 1/4, that 33 cents is more than 25 cents on the dollar. But their assumption was completely wrong. No amount of advertising or point-of-sale material could overcome this fundamental cognitive barrier. The public's perception was so firmly and incorrectly set that the product was doomed. The A&W third-pound burger was eventually pulled from menus, not because it was a bad product, but because it was a product that was, in a tragic twist of irony, simply too smart for its own good. It became a permanent lesson for marketers and businesses everywhere. Never, ever overestimate the public's grasp of basic math, because sometimes the numbers just don't add up. Now, just when you thought marketing mishaps and mathematical confusion were the heights of American food absurdity, let's peel back the wrapper on a truly iconic snack with a secret identity. The golden, cream-filled sponge cake known as the Twinkie is as American as it gets, a symbol of junk food, survivalist prepping, and even cinematic fame. But what most people don't know is that this legendary snack was born with a completely different personality. When the Hostess Company first introduced the Twinkie in 1930, it wasn't filled with that sweet, vanilla-flavored cream we all recognize today. The original recipe, invented by a bakery manager named James Youll, actually featured a luscious banana cream filling. Youll came up with the idea as a way to use the company's shortcake pans year-round beyond the strawberry season. He'd seen these pans sitting idle and had a flash of inspiration. Create a simple, inexpensive snack cake that could be produced continuously. He named his creation after a billboard he saw in St. Louis advertising twinkle toe shoes, and a classic was born, complete with its fruity, tropical banana filling. For over a decade, that's exactly what a Twinkie was. But then, a global conflict literally changed its flavor forever. When World War II erupted, it triggered widespread rationing and massive supply chain disruptions across the United States. Among the many casualties of the war effort was the availability of certain imported fruits, and bananas became incredibly difficult to obtain. Ships that normally carried bananas from Central and South America were diverted for military use, and what limited supply made it through was often prioritized for fresh eating, not for use in processed snack foods. Hostess faced a dilemma. They had a hugely popular product that they could no longer make as originally intended. They couldn't just stop production, they needed a wartime workaround. Their solution was both simple and permanent. They swapped out the scarce banana cream for a vanilla-flavored cream filling, which used ingredients that were far more readily available and not subject to the same shortages. It was a purely practical decision, a change born out of necessity to keep the production lines moving during a time of national crisis. The company fully assumed this was a temporary measure, that once the war was over and bananas were back on the boats, they would revert to the original recipe. But a funny thing happened on the way back to normalcy. Customers had fallen in love with the new version. The vanilla cream Twinkie had been on the market for years by the war's end, and an entire generation had grown up knowing it as the standard. The public's palate had shifted, and the new, simple vanilla flavor had become the expected taste. Hostess, always listening to the market, made the executive decision to stick with the accidental replacement. The vanilla cream wasn't just a substitute, it had become the star. The banana cream Twinkie faded into history, a ghost of a recipe that was forever altered by the pressures of a world at war, proving that sometimes the most iconic American foods aren't created by design, but by sheer delicious accident. And if you think the reinvention of the Twinkie was a strange twist of fate, prepare to have your entire concept of ketchup turned upside down. We all know it as the trusty, tangy condiment we squeeze onto burgers and fries, but in the early 1800s, ketchup was marketed and sold not as a food, but as a powerful medicine. This bizarre chapter in food history was spearheaded by an ambitious and charismatic Ohio physician named Dr. John Cook Bennett. In 1834, Dr. Bennett began making an absolutely astonishing claim. He declared that the common tomato, then often called the love apple, and viewed with deep suspicion by many Americans who believed it to be poisonous, was in fact a miracle vegetable possessing incredible health benefits. He published papers and gave lectures extolling the tomato's virtues, stating it could cure a staggering range of ailments including diarrhea, dyspepsia, and severe indigestion. Dr. Bennett's real genius, however, wasn't in his medical advice, it was in his entrepreneurial spirit. Knowing that people might not rush out to buy bushels of a feared fruit, he figured out a much more palatable and portable way to deliver his supposed cure. He reduced tomato ketchup, an already existing condiment based on Eastern fish-based sauces that British colonists had encountered, down to a highly concentrated extract. He then took this potent ketchup-based syrup and formed it into small, easy-to-swallow pills. He marketed these tomato pills as a powerful, all-natural remedy, a cure-all that could treat everything from the common stomachache to much more serious complaints. The public, always eager for a simple solution to complex health problems, bought it in every sense of the word. For a brief period, these ketchup pills became a national sensation, a patent medicine promising health and vitality in a convenient little package. Of course, Dr. Bennett's claims were completely unsubstantiated by any real scientific evidence. He was a classic 19th century snake oil salesman, capitalizing on the era's lack of regulation and the public's limited medical knowledge. There was no Food and Drug Administration to challenge his outlandish assertions or to test his product's efficacy. His enterprise was ultimately exposed as a fraud, and the ketchup pill craze faded into obscurity as nothing more than a humorous footnote in medical history. But his bizarre campaign had one unintended and lasting positive effect. It helped demystify the tomato and played a significant role in popularizing it across America. By loudly championing the tomato's safety and its health benefits, even under false pretenses, he helped break down the deep-seated cultural fear that had surrounded it, paving the way for it to become the beloved dietary staple it is today. So the next time you reach for that ketchup bottle, remember that you're holding a bottle that was once, however falsely, seen as a bottle of hope and healing. But if you think the history of ketchup is a story of mistaken identity, then the tale of the fortune cookie is a full-blown culinary mystery, a case of cultural appropriation so complete that it's managed to fool an entire nation. This crispy, vanilla-flavored cookie with its slip of paper inside is as synonymous with American Chinese cuisine as chop suey and bright red takeout boxes. Yet, the incredible truth is that if you were to travel to China and order a fortune cookie after your meal, you'd be met with nothing but blank, confused stares. This icon isn't just uncommon there, it is utterly unknown, a complete non-entity. The fortune cookie is as American as baseball, and its origin story is a fascinating tug of war between two immigrant communities. The most widely accepted theory points not to China but to Japan. In the early 20th century, a specific type of cracker was being made in Japan, particularly in the Kyoto region. These were little crescent-shaped cookies called tsujiura senbei, which translates to fortune cracker. They were slightly larger and darker than the cookies we know today, made with sesame and miso instead of vanilla and butter, and they contained a small slip of paper with a fortune or aphorism tucked inside. When Japanese immigrants began arriving in California, they brought this tradition with them. The man most often credited with its American evolution is Makoto Hagiwara, a Japanese landscape designer who was the caretaker of the Japanese tea garden in San Francisco's Golden Gate Park. Around 1907 or 8, Hagiwara began serving a version of these cookies to guests at the tea garden. His version was likely lighter and sweeter, adapted to American tastes, and the fortunes inside were a gesture of hospitality and goodwill. So how did a cookie with Japanese roots become the definitive end to a Chinese meal? The answer lies in the dark chapter of World War II and the internment of Japanese Americans. Following the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941, over 120,000 people of Japanese descent, the vast majority of them American citizens, were forcibly removed from their homes and businesses on the West Coast and imprisoned in internment camps. This overnight disappearance of an entire community created a massive vacuum in the marketplace. Chinese-American entrepreneurs who ran restaurants that were already popular and seen as exotic and exciting saw an opportunity. They adopted the cookie, mass-produced it with cheaper ingredients, and began offering it as a free, complimentary dessert with every meal. It was a brilliant business move. The cookie was inexpensive to make. The fortunes were a fun, memorable gimmick that delighted customers, and it helped further distinguish Chinese restaurants as places that offered a unique and generous dining experience. With their Japanese competitors gone, the Chinese-American community effectively claimed the cookie as their own, and a new tradition was cemented into the fabric of American culture. The dispute over the cookie's true origin even made it to court in 1983, in what was dubbed the Fortune Cookie Court Battle. A Los Angeles judge was tasked with hearing evidence from both sides to determine whether the cookie was of Japanese or Chinese ancestry, all to settle a trademark dispute. After hearing testimony from historians and culinary experts, the judge ultimately ruled that the cookie was indeed of Japanese origin. But by then, the verdict of American public opinion was already final. The fortune cookie had become forever intertwined with the experience of eating Chinese food, a perfect example of how immigrant cultures in America adapt, blend, and create something entirely new that eventually gets sent back out into the world as a symbol of a place it never truly came from. If you thought the fortune cookie's origin story was a case of mistaken identity, wait until you hear about a government-mandated meal that sounds more like a Thanksgiving feast gone rogue. While most states are content with honoring a single fruit, vegetable, or pie as their official symbol, the state of Oklahoma decided that simply wasn't enough. In 1988, the Oklahoma State Legislature looked at the concept of state pride and said, "Why choose one?" Their solution was to pass House Bill number 1987, which officially declared an entire multi-course, staggeringly massive spread as the official state meal of Oklahoma. This isn't a light lunch or a sensible dinner. It's a caloric love letter to Southern and Midwestern comfort food, a proclamation so vast it reads like the inventory of a well-stocked country kitchen. The state's official menu begins with a battalion of sides: fried okra, squash, cornbread, and grits. Then comes the main event, a protein-packed parade featuring barbecue pork, sausage, and gravy, and the undisputed king of Oklahoma cuisine, chicken fried steak. And just when you think you couldn't possibly eat another bite, the government of Oklahoma insists you must save room for dessert, specifically strawberries and pecan pie. As if that weren't enough, the meal is also to be served with black-eyed peas and corn, ensuring no food group is left behind. The reasoning behind this gargantuan declaration was a genuine, if slightly overzealous, effort to promote the state's agricultural products and celebrate its unique culinary heritage. Each item on the list is a nod to a key Oklahoma crop or a beloved regional dish. Pork and beef highlight the state's thriving livestock industry, while strawberries, pecans, and corn represent its fruitful farmland. Chicken fried steak, in particular, holds a place of honor as a dish that embodies the resourceful, hearty spirit of the state's early settlers. This wasn't just a random list, it was a curated display of edible state pride, designed to be taught in schools and promoted to tourists. But the sheer scale of the meal is what transforms it from an educational tool into a truly ridiculous American food fact. We're not talking about a suggested tasting menu. This is a full-blown, state-sanctioned feast. If you were to actually sit down and consume the entire Oklahoma state meal in one sitting, you'd be looking at a caloric intake that could easily sustain a person for 2 or 3 days, a monument to indulgence that only a government body could possibly endorse with a straight face. It stands as a wonderfully absurd reminder that in America, our passion for food knows no bounds, not even the bounds of a single, reasonable plate. It's a testament to the idea that when it comes to celebrating who we are, sometimes more is more, and in Oklahoma, more means an entire buffet line signed into law. Now, if you think a government-mandated feast is a bold declaration of state pride, just wait until you hear about a Western delicacy that takes culinary bravery to a whole new level. We're heading to the rugged ranchlands of the American West for a dish that is perhaps the greatest misnomer in all of food history, the Rocky Mountain oyster. If you hear that name and picture a platter of fresh, briny bivalves from the sea, you are in for the shock of your life. This is not seafood, not even close. A Rocky Mountain oyster is in fact a deep-fried bull testicle. That's right. This so-called oyster is the product of a cattle ranch, not an ocean reef, and it represents one of the most extreme examples of nose-to-tail eating you will ever encounter. The origin of this dish is rooted not in shock value, but in pure hardscrabble practicality. On large cattle ranches, male calves are often castrated to make them easier to manage and to improve the quality of their meat, a process that leaves behind a significant amount of, well, leftovers. For generations of ranchers, wasting any part of an animal was unthinkable. It was a matter of both economics and respect for the livestock that sustained their way of life. This ethos of use everything led to some incredibly creative and sometimes challenging culinary innovations. So after the necessary work was done, these ranchers would gather up the byproducts, peel off the tough outer membrane, and set about turning them into a meal. They would typically slice them into thin medallions, dredge them in seasoned flour, and throw them into a vat of hot oil until they were golden brown and crispy on the outside. Served with a side of cocktail sauce or horseradish for dipping, they became a protein-rich snack for the hardworking cowboys, a way to ensure that nothing from the day's work went to waste. For decades, this was purely insider food, a rural tradition kept within the confines of the ranch. But as the American West began to open up to tourism, particularly after World War II, this bizarre bite made its way onto the menus of roadside taverns and festival grounds. It was transformed from a practical meal into the ultimate tourist novelty item, a dare food designed to separate the tenderfoot city slickers from the genuine old hands. Eating a Rocky Mountain oyster became a badge of honor, a story to take back home. Entire festivals, like the famous Testicle Festival, still held in several western states, were built around this single dish, celebrating it with live music, eating contests, and a general atmosphere of rowdy, good-natured bravado. The taste and texture are often described as a surprise to the uninitiated. They don't taste, as one might fear, like anything overtly organ-like or metallic. When prepared correctly, they are remarkably mild, with a flavor often compared to tough, slightly gamey calamari or even overcooked chicken gizzards. The texture is the real hurdle for most people, a firm, slightly rubbery chewiness encased in a crunchy fried shell. It's a dish that exists in a unique space, simultaneously a symbol of authentic Western resourcefulness and a calculated gimmick designed to thrill and occasionally horrify visitors. It stands as a testament to the idea that in America, even the most unlikely parts of an animal can be breaded, fried, and turned into a legend. Just when you thought you'd heard it all, it's time to pull back the curtain on what's really in your pantry. And we're not just talking about ingredients on the label. You might want to sit down for this one because the Food and Drug Administration, the very agency tasked with keeping our food supply safe, actually permits a certain amount of insect parts, rodent hairs, and other, let's call them natural contaminants, in many of the foods we eat every single day. Before you panic and start eyeing that jar of peanut butter with suspicion, there's a method to this seeming madness, and it all comes down to a little-known but incredibly important document called the Food Defect Levels Handbook. This handbook isn't a secret, it's publicly available, and it outlines exactly how many microscopic insect fragments or bits of rodent hair are allowed per specific quantity of food. For example, that creamy peanut butter you love, the FDA allows an average of 30 or more insect fragments per 100 grams. Your favorite chocolate bar can contain up to 60 insect fragments per 100 grams, and a single pound of wheat flour can legally contain up to 75 insect fragments and still be considered safe for sale. Now, before you recoil in horror, it's crucial to understand that this isn't a sign of a broken system or corporate negligence. In fact, it's the exact opposite. These regulations are a brilliant, pragmatic acknowledgement of a simple, unavoidable truth. We are not manufacturing food in a sterile laboratory. We are harvesting it from nature on an industrial scale. Think about how food is actually produced. Peanuts are grown in vast fields, dug out of the ground and piled high. Wheat is harvested by massive combines. Cacao pods are split open in tropical climates. In these environments, insects, rodents, and molds are not intruders. They are part of the ecosystem. It is logistically and financially impossible to grow, harvest, and process millions of tons of raw agricultural product and achieve 100% purity. The goal of modern processing is to get as close to that ideal as possible, but expecting absolute zero contamination is a fantasy. if the FDA enforced a zero-tolerance policy for these natural, unavoidable defects, we would have virtually no processed grain, nut, or spice products on our shelves. The entire food supply chain would grind to a halt. So instead of pursuing an unattainable perfection, the FDA's defect levels act as a critical quality control benchmark. They represent the maximum level of contamination that is both unavoidable under good manufacturing practices and critically pose no hazard to human health. The presence of a few microscopic insect parts in your spaghetti doesn't mean the food is spoiled or dangerous. In fact, from a biological perspective, a bit of extra insect protein is harmless. These regulations ensure that while companies are striving for the highest level of cleanliness, there is a clear, scientifically backed safety net that distinguishes between genuinely hazardous contamination and mere aesthetic imperfections. It's the government acknowledging that sometimes a little bit of nature's reality in our food isn't just acceptable, it's absolutely necessary if we want to keep the world fed. So just when you think you've got a handle on what's in your food, along comes a flavor so iconic, so utterly pervasive that it defines an entire season, and it's built on a complete and total lie. We're talking about pumpkin spice, the cinnamon-scented juggernaut that takes over coffee shops, grocery stores, and even convenience aisles every single autumn. Here's the deliciously absurd truth. Despite its name, the flavoring known as pumpkin spice contains absolutely zero pumpkin, not a single gram, not even a whisper. The flavor we all associate with ripe, orange gourds is actually a clever blend of warming spices that were never about the pumpkin itself, but about what was cooked inside it. The classic pumpkin spice blend is a mix of cinnamon, nutmeg, ginger, and cloves, sometimes with allspice added to the party. These were the spices that colonial cooks would combine and use to season their pumpkin pies, sweetbreads, and other baked goods. The pumpkin, you see, was merely the vehicle, a bland, sturdy squash that acted as a blank canvas for these more expensive and flavorful imports. The pumpkin provided the bulk and the texture of the pie, but the soul, the very identity of the taste, came entirely from that spice mix. For centuries, this was just a practical bit of culinary knowledge. Then, in a move of pure marketing genius, the McCormick Spice Company decided to bottle that specific combination of spices and sell it as a pre-mixed blend. They needed a name that would instantly tell home cooks what to use it for, and pumpkin pie spice was the obvious, logical choice. The name stuck, forever linking the flavor of the spices to the pie filling itself and starting a centuries-long case of mistaken identity. The modern pumpkin spice craze, however, can be pinpointed to one specific moment in 2003. That's when a Starbucks product developer named Peter Dukes, inspired by the seasonal pies at Thanksgiving, decided to try and capture that familiar, comforting flavor in a liquid form. His team worked to create a syrup that perfectly mimicked the McCormick spice blend, and they added it to steamed milk, espresso, and a crown of whipped cream to create the pumpkin spice latte. They launched it that fall as a limited-time offering, and it wasn't just a success, it was a cultural earthquake. The drink, affectionately known as the PSL, tapped into something deep, a craving for nostalgia, for coziness, for the unmistakable signal that fall had officially arrived. It became a ritual, and its runaway success proved that consumers weren't just willing to accept this spice blend in a drink, they were desperate for it. That was the floodgate moment. Other companies saw the fervor and the profits, and the market was suddenly flooded with pumpkin spice everything. We got pumpkin spice cereals, pumpkin spice dog treats, pumpkin spice hummus, pumpkin spice potato chips, and even pumpkin spice spam. The term pumpkin spice became less of a description and more of a marketing magic word, a guaranteed way to inject a dose of autumnal fervor into any product, regardless of whether it made any logical sense. And through it all, the central joke has persisted. We are collectively celebrating the taste of fall by consuming a flavor profile that celebrates everything but the actual namesake ingredient. We're eating and drinking the idea of pumpkin pie, the memory of it, the spice rack version of it, all while the humble pumpkin itself sits quietly in the field, probably wondering what all the fuss is about. It's a testament to the power of suggestion and the potent allure of seasonality, proving that sometimes the flavor we crave most isn't in the food itself, but in the feeling it's designed to evoke. And speaking of things that are hard to believe, imagine a city street transformed into a river of red, with tens of thousands of people pelting each other with overripe tomatoes until everything and everyone is buried in a thick, seedy pulp. That's La Tomatina, the legendary festival held in the small Spanish town of Buñol, which has become the world's most famous large-scale food fight. But what might surprise you is that this iconic event, which uses a staggering 150,000 pounds of tomatoes in a single hour of pure, pulpy chaos, actually has a quirky American counterpart. For over 50 years, the students of the Colorado School of Mines have been engaging in their own tradition of organized mayhem known as the Or-Cart Sortish, a massive food fight that traditionally marked the beginning of the school year. While the scale is different, the spirit of cathartic release is exactly the same. The sheer tonnage of produce used in these events is where the absurdity truly comes into focus. The tomatoes used in La Tomatina are specifically grown for the event. They are a low-grade, overripe variety that is unsuitable for sale in supermarkets or for canning. The local government emphasizes that they are not fit for consumption, attempting to frame the event as a use of what would otherwise be wasted. But that argument begins to crumble when you consider the resources that went into growing them: the water, the land, the labor, and the fuel for transportation, all dedicated to cultivating a crop with the sole purpose of being immediately destroyed. It's a spectacle of waste on a monumental scale, a temporary, joyful rejection of the very idea of food scarcity for the sake of a uniquely messy good time. This paradox is at the heart of what makes these festivals so fascinating and so controversially ridiculous. In a world where food insecurity remains a critical issue, the image of perfectly edible vegetables being hurled through the air purely for entertainment can feel deeply unsettling, even immoral. Critics rightly point out the disconnect, questioning the ethics of such a flagrant display when so many go hungry. Yet, proponents argue that the tomatoes used are truly a lost cause, that the economic boost to the town from tourism is significant, and that the event provides an invaluable cultural touchstone and a once-in-a-lifetime experience for participants. It's a collision of practical economics and pure, unadulterated fun, creating a debate with no easy answers. Beyond the philosophical questions, the practical aftermath is its own kind of spectacle. Once the final tomato has been thrown, the clean-up operation is a Herculean task. In Buñol, fire trucks hose down the streets and participants, using water cannons to wash the acidic tomato pulp into the gutters. The citric acid from the millions of crushed fruits actually acts as a natural disinfectant, leaving the town's cobblestones remarkably clean, but the process is immense and costly. It's a planned, accepted consequence of the event, a necessary price paid for an hour of unparalleled communal madness. This combination of calculated waste, monumental clean-up, and pure, childish joy makes the world's largest food fight a perfect symbol of humanity's capacity for celebration, even when that celebration flies in the face of logic and practicality. It is, in its own soggy, seedy way, a testament to our sometimes ridiculous desire to break the rules and make a beautiful, delicious mess. But while we're on the subject of foods with hidden identities, let's talk about a time when the American government didn't just permit a food to be misleading, it actively forced it to be. For nearly a century, a fierce and bizarre battle was waged not on the battlefield, but in the kitchen, pitting the powerful dairy industry against a new, cheaper challenger, margarine. And in the heartland of America, the state of Iowa became the site of one of the most absurd food laws ever written, a statute that made it illegal for margarine to look like the product it was designed to imitate. To understand this, we have to go back to the late 19th century. Margarine was invented in France in 1869 by a chemist named Hippolyte Mege Maurice, created in response to a challenge from Emperor Napoleon III to find a cheap, stable fat to feed the military and the lower classes. It was made primarily from beef tallow at the time, and it was a pale, unappetizing white. It was a practical, affordable substitute for butter, and that's exactly what terrified the American dairy industry. As margarine's popularity grew, dairy farmers saw their profits threatened and launched a massive lobbying campaign, not to ban margarine outright, but to make it as undesirable and difficult to use as possible. They successfully pushed for a federal tax on margarine and for a series of state-level laws known as Margarine laws that were designed to kill its appeal through sheer inconvenience and stigma. This is where Iowa's law enters the picture as one of the most extreme examples. For decades, it was outright illegal to sell yellow margarine in the state. If you wanted to purchase margarine, you would bring it home in a box as a white, lard-like brick that looked absolutely nothing like the golden butter on the table. But that wasn't the end of the process. Inside the box, manufacturers were required to include a separate, small packet of yellow dye. The consumer's job was to then knead this dye into the white fat by hand, a messy, time-consuming process that often resulted in a streaky, unconvincing final product. The law was a masterstroke of psychological marketing. It wasn't enough that margarine was cheaper. The dairy interests needed to ensure it was also seen as inferior, artificial, and a hassle. By forcing it to be sold in its unappealing natural state, the law screamed to consumers that this was not a natural product. The very act of having to dye it yourself reinforced the idea that you were engaged in a form of deception, that you were trying to make something fake look real. This incredibly specific regulation was just one part of a vast web of protectionist laws that persisted for generations. Some states required margarine to be dyed an unappetizing pink to ensure no one would ever mistake it for butter. The federal government even got in on the act, levying such heavy taxes on colored margarine that for years it was almost impossible to find the yellow version anywhere. These laws were finally repealed state by state over the mid-20th century, with Iowa's particular ban on yellow margarine falling in 1991, one of the very last such laws to be removed from the books. This long, strange war over color stands as a testament to the immense political power of the dairy lobby, and a perfect example of how food regulations aren't always about safety or truth. Sometimes, they're just about protecting a profitable status quo by any means necessary, even if it means making everyone go through the trouble of dyeing their own breakfast. But just as margarine's color was a government-mandated deception, another beloved American dessert was born from a far more wholesome kind of trickery, one born not of lobbying but of sheer necessity. During the Great Depression, when fresh fruit was an unimaginable luxury for millions of families, home cooks had to get incredibly creative to provide any sense of normalcy or comfort. Out of this era of profound scarcity came one of the most astonishing examples of culinary sleight of hand, the mock apple pie. This is a dessert that looks like apple pie, smells like apple pie, and even has the soft, slightly tart filling of an apple pie, yet it contains not a single slice of actual apple. The star ingredient, the stunning substitute that makes the entire illusion possible, is something you'd likely never associate with dessert: Ritz crackers. The recipe, which was famously printed right on the back of the Ritz cracker box for decades, is a masterpiece of ingredient alchemy. The process begins by gently simmering 2 cups of sugar with 2 cups of water and 2 teaspoons of cream of tartar to create a simple syrup. Then comes the magic trick. You stir in the juice and zest of 1 or 2 lemons. This combination of sweet syrup and sharp citrus is absolutely critical, as it provides the foundational sweet and tart flavor profile that our brains immediately recognize as apple. Once this syrup is prepared, you carefully fold in roughly 36 coarsely broken Ritz crackers, making sure not to stir too vigorously and break them down completely. The crackers are then poured into a prepared pie crust dotted with butter and topped with a second crust before being baked until golden brown. The result is nothing short of miraculous. During the baking process, the crackers soften in the hot lemon syrup, losing their savory, buttery identity and transforming into soft, slightly translucent layers that perfectly mimic the tender texture of cooked apples. The lemon juice provides the necessary acidity that tricks the palate into perceiving the fruity tang of a Granny Smith or McIntosh, while the sugar syrup sweetens the whole concoction. The cream of tartar, which is actually a byproduct of winemaking, further enhances the fruity illusion and helps give the filling a bit of body. When served warm, it is nearly impossible for the unsuspecting eater to detect the ruse. The pie has the same comforting, spiced flavor and soft, yielding texture of the real thing, a beautiful and delicious lie baked into a flaky crust. This invention wasn't just a quirky recipe, it was a profound act of resilience. For families who couldn't afford apples, which were often expensive and out of season, a box of cheap, shelf-stable crackers and some basic pantry staples could create a cherished treat that made a difficult time feel a little more normal. It was a way to maintain tradition and celebration in the face of overwhelming hardship, a small victory of ingenuity over circumstance. The mock apple pie stands as a lasting tribute to the spirit of the home cook, proving that with a little creativity, even the most humble ingredients can be transformed into something extraordinary and comforting, a perfect symbol of making do and finding sweetness even when it seems there is none to be found. And after all that talk of government-mandated food colors and pies made of crackers, we arrive at a culinary conflict that proves some battles are too delicious to ever truly be settled. This isn't a debate over a complex gourmet dish, but a fierce, multi-generational argument over the true origins of a deli classic, the Reuben sandwich. It's a perfect combination of salty corned beef, tangy sauerkraut, creamy Swiss cheese, and zesty Russian dressing, all grilled between two slices of hearty rye bread. But ask where it came from, and you'll instantly ignite a friendly but passionate feud between two American cities separated by nearly 1,300 miles, New York City and Omaha, Nebraska. The New York claim is the older and more widely circulated story, dripping with the old-world glamour of a Broadway hotel. This version places the invention squarely in the 1920s at the legendary Reuben's Delicatessen, a celebrity hotspot inside the Hotel store in Times Square. The tale goes that the sandwich was created for and named after the deli's star customer, a silent film actress named Annette Seelos. As the story is told, she was a regular who loved a good snack, and one night the deli's owner, Arnold Reuben, crafted this particular combination just for her. The sandwich was an instant hit with the theater crowd and quickly earned a permanent spot on the menu. This origin story has the appeal of a classic New York legend, a dash of celebrity, a famous location, and the aura of a culinary genius striking gold. It feels right at home in the city that never sleeps, a place where iconic foods are born in the hustle of the night. But then there's the Nebraska narrative, and it is every bit as compelling and meticulously documented. This account moves the invention out of the glitz of Manhattan and into the heartland, to the Blackstone Hotel in Omaha in the 1950s. Here, the creator wasn't a deli owner but a grocer and poker enthusiast named Reuben Kulikovsky. As the story goes, Reuben was a regular participant in the hotel's weekly poker game, and one night the group's designated cook, a waiter named Charles Skimmel, needed to whip up a late-night meal for the players. He raided the kitchen, gathering up the corned beef, sauerkraut, Swiss cheese, and rye bread. Instead of serving it all separately, he decided to pile it all onto the bread, grill it, and serve it as a hearty, handheld feast. The players loved it so much they started calling it Reuben's sandwich in honor of their friend. This claim isn't just based on oral history, it's backed by a gold medal. The sandwich was entered into a national recipe contest by the Blackstone Hotel's owner, and it won, catapulting this specific version of the Reuben to national fame and cementing its place in American culinary history. So who's right? The debate rages on, with each side holding firm to its story. New Yorkers point to their earlier timeline and the classic deli culture, while Nebraskans point to their contest win and the specific, documented popularity of their version. The beautiful, ridiculous truth is that we may never know for sure. The Reuben sandwich exists in a state of glorious ambiguity, a testament to how fiercely communities can claim ownership over a beloved food. It's more than just a combination of ingredients, it's a symbol of regional pride. For New York, it represents the innovation of its immigrant-driven deli culture. For Omaha, it's a point of Midwestern pride, a proof that a world-class creation can come from anywhere, not just the coastal food hubs. This simple grilled sandwich reminds us that food is never just about sustenance. It's about identity, history, and the stories we tell ourselves about who we are and where we come from. And in this case, the story is so good, we get to enjoy two different versions of it. Now, from the contentious origins of a classic sandwich, we journey to a creation story with far less debate and a whole lot more processed cheese. You might know Cheez Whiz as that bright orange, impossibly smooth substance that comes in a jar, a staple of quick snacks and questionable culinary choices. But this iconic product wasn't born from a desire to revolutionize the American pantry. It was invented for one very specific, very Philadelphian purpose: to crown the city's most famous sandwich. In the early 1950s, the cheesesteak was already a local legend, pioneered by Pat Oliveri of Pat's King of Steaks. His original creation was a simple masterpiece of sliced ribeye on an Italian roll, but the addition of cheese took it to another level. For years, the standard was a slice of American cheese gently melted over the hot meat. It was delicious, but it had an operational problem for a busy steak shop: it was slow. Melting individual slices to order during a lunch rush created a bottleneck. The cheese needed time to properly melt and become one with the meat, and time was the one thing a hustling short-order cook didn't have. Pat Oliveri saw an opportunity for improvement. He wanted a cheese product that could be applied quickly, that would melt instantly upon contact with the sizzling meat, and that would provide a consistent, creamy coating in every single bite. He needed a revolution in cheesy convenience, and he knew just who to call: the food scientists at the Kraft Foods Company. This wasn't a random suggestion. It was a direct request from a cornerstone of Philadelphia's food culture to one of the nation's largest food producers. The team at Kraft took on the challenge with gusto. Their goal was to engineer a cheese sauce that was shelf-stable, required no refrigeration, and could be instantly liquefied with heat. Using their existing knowledge from creating processed cheese, they developed a new formula. They started with a base of aged cheddar for a sharper flavor profile than standard American cheese, then blended it with whey, milk proteins, and a powerful combination of emulsifying salt. These emulsifiers, particularly sodium phosphate, were the real key to the invention. They prevented the oils and solids in the cheese from separating when heated, creating that signature, velvety smooth texture that never gets oily or gritty. The final product was a vibrantly colored, intensely cheesy paste that could be squirted, spread, or melted in seconds. They called it Cheez Whiz, and when they delivered it to Pat's King of Steaks, it was an immediate game changer. For the cooks behind the counter, it was a dream. A quick ladle of Cheez Whiz over the hot steak instantly transformed into a perfect, creamy blanket of cheese, shaving precious seconds off the preparation of each sandwich and allowing them to keep the line moving. For customers, it offered a new, tangier, more robust flavor experience compared to the milder American cheese. It quickly became a staple option right alongside its predecessors, American and Provolone, creating the holy trinity of Philly cheesesteak cheeses. The invention was so perfectly suited to its task that it transcended its original purpose. While it solved a problem for a single steak shop in South Philadelphia, Kraft knew they had a winner on their hands. They began mass-producing and marketing Cheez Whiz to the national audience, presenting it as the ultimate convenience food for the modern, space-age kitchen. It became a dip for chips, a sauce for vegetables, and a bizarre but beloved topping for everything from toast to hot dogs. But its true legacy, its reason for being, will always be tied to that iconic sandwich, a perfect example of American culinary innovation where a specific local need on a busy city corner gave birth to a processed food product that would eventually find a home in millions of cupboards across the country. And speaking of foods with names that don't quite tell the whole story, let's tackle one of the most wonderfully confusing dishes in all of American comfort cuisine: chicken fried steak. The name itself is a bit of a head-scratcher, a culinary paradox that seems to suggest you're eating poultry that somehow identifies as beef, but the reality is far more straightforward and utterly delicious. This is not chicken at all. It is 100% beefsteak, typically a tougher, less expensive cut like cube steak or round steak, that has been prepared using the exact same technique as classic Southern fried chicken. The name is a direct description of the cooking method, not the main ingredient. It's beef fried chicken style. The process is a masterpiece of culinary transformation, taking a humble cut of meat and turning it into something tender, crispy, and deeply satisfying. It begins with a piece of beef that is mechanically tenderized, often run through a cubing machine that scores it with a pattern of small holes, breaking down the tough muscle fibers. This crucial step ensures the final product won't be tough and chewy. The steak is then given a luxurious bath in seasoned buttermilk, which further tenderizes the meat and provides a sticky base for the next layer. From there, it's dredged in a well-seasoned flour mixture, often containing a blend of paprika, garlic powder, onion powder, and plenty of black pepper. This isn't a light dusting. It's a full, heavy coating that's essential for creating that signature craggy, crunchy crust. Then comes the magic. The breaded steak is carefully lowered into a skillet of shimmering hot oil, or more traditionally, rendered bacon fat, and pan-fried until it achieves a perfect golden brown exterior. The sound of that steak hitting the hot grease is the sound of comfort food coming to life. The result is a textural marvel, a shatteringly crisp, seasoned crust that gives way to a surprisingly tender and juicy piece of beef inside. But the journey isn't complete yet. A proper chicken fried steak would be naked without its essential companion, a river of creamy, peppery white gravy. This gravy, often called country gravy or sawmill gravy, is made from the precious brown bits left in the pan after frying, combined with milk, flour, and a massive amount of freshly cracked black pepper. It's poured generously over the entire fried steak, creating a glorious contrast between the crispy crust and the rich, velvety sauce. This dish is the undisputed king of comfort food in Texas and across the South, a hearty, working-class meal born from necessity and ingenuity. It represents the spirit of making something extraordinary out of something ordinary, a testament to the power of technique and a little bit of frying magic. It's a dish that proudly wears its confusing name as a badge of honor, a perfect example of how in America we don't just eat food, we tell a story with it, one delicious gravy-smothered bite at a time. But while we're on the subject of ingenious and convenient food packaging, let's talk about an invention that literally changed how America ate dinner. The iconic TV dinner, that compartmentalized aluminum tray that became a symbol of mid-century modernity, has a surprisingly high-flying origin story. It wasn't born in a test kitchen focused on home cooking. Its design was lifted directly from the emerging world of commercial aviation. In the early 1950s, the Swanson Food Company found itself with a massive and potentially disastrous problem: a huge surplus of frozen turkey. They had drastically over-ordered for the previous Thanksgiving season, and now they were sitting on 26 train carloads of frozen birds, a literal fortune in poultry that was just taking up freezer space and losing them money by the day. The company was desperate for a solution, a way to move this mountain of turkey before it became a total loss. One of their top salesmen, a clever and observant man named Jerry Thomas, is credited with the flash of inspiration that would solve this crisis. He had recently been on a commercial flight and had been served his meal on a novel compartmentalized aluminum tray. This tray was a marvel of efficiency, with separate sections to keep the meat, vegetables, and potato from mingling, and it was designed to be heated right in the galley oven and served to the passenger all in one unit. Thomas saw in that airline tray the perfect blueprint for a brand new kind of home meal. He pitched the idea to Swanson's executives: take that surplus turkey, slice it up, and pair it with dressing, gravy, and peas. Then package it all in a compartmentalized aluminum tray modeled directly after the airline service and market it as a complete heat and eat meal for one. The executives were skeptical, to say the least. The concept of a full frozen meal was still incredibly novel, and they worried about the cost of the aluminum packaging. But Thomas was persuasive, and with that massive turkey surplus hanging over their heads, they decided to take a $5,000 gamble on the project. They called their new product the TV dinner, and that name was a stroke of marketing genius that tapped directly into the cultural moment of 1953. Television ownership was exploding in American homes, moving from a luxury for the wealthy to a standard fixture in the living room. Families were gathering around this new glowing box for entertainment, and the idea of a convenient meal that could be cooked in just 25 minutes and eaten right on a lap tray in front of the westerns or variety shows was incredibly appealing. It wasn't just selling food, it was selling an experience, a modern, casual alternative to the formal family dinner table. The first year's production run was 10,000 units, a number the executives feared was far too ambitious. They needn't have worried. The TV dinner was a seismic hit, selling over 10 million units in its first full year of production. That mountain of surplus turkey vanished almost overnight, transformed into a cultural phenomenon. The design was meticulously crafted for the experience. The aluminum tray was not only functional for heating, but also served as its own plate, minimizing cleanup. The packaging was designed to look like a television set itself, with the tray as the screen and the picture of the meal showing you exactly what your program would be. It was a complete, self-contained system that celebrated convenience and modern living. The Swanson TV dinner did more than just solve a turkey problem. It helped launch the entire frozen food industry and fundamentally altered the American relationship with mealtime, proving that sometimes the best ideas don't come from looking down at a stove, but from looking up at the sky. And if you thought the design of your TV dinner was a calculated choice, wait until you hear about the symphony playing inside your cereal box. Walk down any grocery store aisle, and you'll be surrounded by a subtle, crinkly chorus, a sound that isn't an accidental byproduct of packaging, but a meticulously engineered marketing strategy. For many cereal brands, that noisy, crinkly plastic bag hidden inside the cardboard box is not just a moisture barrier. It's a powerful psychological tool designed to hijack your senses and pull your cart toward their product. This strategy is rooted in a field of study known as sensory marketing, which understands that our purchasing decisions are influenced by much more than just sight and taste. Sound plays a crucial, often subconscious role in how we perceive a product's quality. The crinkling of that inner bag is a carefully crafted auditory cue that sends two very specific messages to your brain. First and most directly, it's a signal of freshness. That sharp, crisp sound is subconsciously associated with a new, unbroken seal, suggesting that the contents inside are still crisp, haven't gone stale, and are protected from the environment. It's the same reason we gently squeeze a bag of chips or a loaf of bread. We're listening for that satisfying rustle that promises a perfect texture. A silent or dull-sounding bag, on the other hand, might subconsciously register as old, soft, or tampered with. Second, that noise functions as a powerful attention grabber in a visually chaotic environment. A grocery store aisle is a battlefield for your attention, with hundreds of brightly colored boxes all vying for a glance. In this visual overload, sound becomes a unique differentiator. The crinkle of a bag as a stocker restocks the shelf, or the sound of a box being gently shaken by another shopper, cuts through the visual noise. It triggers a basic human instinct known as auditory orienting, where a sudden, non-threatening sound causes us to automatically turn our head to identify the source. In that split second, the brand has successfully captured your focus, pulling your eyes away from the competition and onto their box. It's an auditory lure, and it's incredibly effective. This isn't a random happenstance. It's the result of extensive research and development by food packaging engineers. They experiment with different types of plastic polymers and bag thicknesses to find the perfect acoustic signature, a sound that is loud enough to be noticeable and satisfying, but not so loud or abrasive that it becomes annoying. They understand that this sound is part of the product's brand identity, as important as its mascot or its logo. So the next time you're reaching for a box and hear that familiar crinkle, know that you're not just hearing plastic. You're hearing the sound of a multi-billion-dollar industry whispering directly to your subconscious, a brilliant and slightly ridiculous reminder that in the world of American food, even the smallest, most mundane details are engineered for maximum impact. And just when you thought we'd covered every possible way to celebrate a deep-fried animal part, allow me to introduce you to an event that takes that concept and turns it into a full-blown town-wide party. Across the American West, in small towns from Montana to Arizona, you'll find annual celebrations dedicated entirely to the Rocky Mountain oyster, but perhaps none is more famously rowdy than the one held in Rock Creek, Montana. This isn't just a quiet dinner, it's the Testy Festi, a raucous multi-day festival that has become the undisputed world capital of ballpark food in the most literal sense possible. The atmosphere at this particular festival is less county fair and more frontier bacchanal, a playful embrace of its own ridiculous premise. The event's very name, Testy Festi, sets the tone with a knowing wink and a nudge, inviting attendees to leave their inhibitions at the gate and fully lean into the absurdity. The centerpiece of the entire weekend is, of course, the eating contest, where competitive eaters and brave locals alike see just many of these breaded and fried delicacies they can power through in a set amount of time. It's a spectacle of sheer determination, a battle against both the clock and one's own gag reflex, all met with roaring cheers and good-natured heckling from the crowd. But the festivities extend far beyond the consumption of the main ingredient. The air is filled with the sounds of live country and rock bands. There are bawdy costume contests that encourage creative interpretations of the theme, and a general sense of mischievous camaraderie permeates everything. What's truly fascinating about events like the Testy Festi is how they perfectly illustrate the American talent for turning a practical, frugal tradition into a thriving tourist economy. For the ranchers, this was always just a way to use the whole animal, but for the towns that host these festivals, it has become a brilliant economic engine. They have taken an inside joke, a piece of genuine Western culture that city folks might find bizarre, and packaged it into a must-attend experience. People travel from all over the country not just to try the food, but to be part of the story, to earn their bragging rights and a t-shirt that will undoubtedly spark conversation back home. It's a masterclass in cultural marketing, transforming a symbol of rural resourcefulness into an event that generates significant revenue and puts these small towns on the map. It proves that in America, even the most unusual local custom can be harnessed, celebrated, and served up with a side of live music and cold beer, creating a community tradition that is equal parts authentic, outrageous, and unforgettable. Now, speaking of foods that are a true melting pot, there's perhaps no better example than the rich, soul-warming stew that is the heart of Louisiana cooking, gumbo. The name itself is a clue to its deep and complex history, a direct linguistic import from across the Atlantic. The word gumbo is derived from Kayan gumbo, the word for okra in the West African Bantu languages spoken by many of the people who were forcibly brought to Louisiana through the transatlantic slave trade. This isn't a vague connection, it's a direct line, a culinary term that crossed the ocean and took root in the New World, forever linking the dish to its African origins. Okra is more than just an ingredient in traditional gumbo, it's a vital thickening agent. When sliced and simmered, the pods release a mucilaginous substance that gives the stew its characteristic, slightly viscous body. This technique of using okra as a thickener was a foundational cooking method brought directly from West Africa, and it became one of the essential pillars upon which this New World dish was built. But the story of gumbo is not a single-threaded narrative. It is a beautiful braid of three distinct culinary traditions that collided in the Louisiana territory. While the West Africans contributed the name and the okra, the Choctaw and other local Native American tribes introduced a second crucial thickening agent, filet powder made from dried and ground sassafras leaves. This provided an alternative way to achieve the stew's signature consistency, especially in the cooler months when fresh okra was unavailable. The French culinary influence from the colonists who settled in the region provided the third essential piece, the roux. This cooked mixture of fat and flour is the base for countless French sauces and stews, and in Louisiana it was transformed. Cooks there took the technique and ran with it, developing a culture of dark, chocolate-colored roux that cooks for much longer than its blonde French cousin, imparting a deep, nutty, complex flavor that forms the foundational soul of the gumbo pot. These three threads, the African okra, the Native American filet, and the French roux woven together with local ingredients like shrimp, crab, chicken, and andouille sausage, created a dish that is the very embodiment of its region. Gumbo is more than a meal, it is an edible history lesson, a testament to resilience, adaptation, and the incredible beauty that can emerge from cultural fusion. It stands as a powerful reminder that some of America's most beloved foods were not invented in a vacuum, but were forged in the complicated, often painful exchanges between cultures, each one leaving an indelible mark on the pot. And if you think the origin of the Reuben is shrouded in mystery, prepare to step into the even murkier history of another multi-layered American classic. The club sandwich, with its stately triple-decker construction of toasted bread, turkey, bacon, lettuce, tomato, and mayonnaise, feels like it should have a birth certificate signed by royalty. Its very name suggests an origin story set within the wood-paneled dining rooms of an exclusive gentleman's club, and that's exactly the tale many believe. The most persistent myth points the finger at the prestigious Saratoga Clubhouse in Saratoga Springs, New York, a famed gambling resort for the Gilded Age elite in the late 1800s. According to this lore, a chef created the substantial sandwich to satisfy the hungry appetites of wealthy club members playing cards late into the night, needing a meal they could eat with one hand without leaving the table. It's a perfectly elegant story that fits the sandwich's sophisticated image, but like many good origin tales, it's nearly impossible to verify with any concrete evidence. But the Saratoga story isn't the only claimant in this culinary whodunit. Another compelling theory transports the invention from a static club to a moving one, the luxurious dining cars of America's great railroads. In this version, the club sandwich was born out of necessity and limited space, a clever way for chefs in cramped galley kitchens to create a hearty, satisfying, and most importantly, neat meal for wealthy passengers traveling long distances. The sandwich's structure is perfect for this environment. The toothpick speared through the center to hold its towering form intact is ideal for preventing a mess on a swaying train, and its ingredients were all staples that could be easily stored and prepared on board. This theory feels just as plausible as the first, painting a picture of innovation born from the unique challenges of the early 20th century travel industry. Perhaps the most telling clue in the entire mystery isn't a person or a place, but a date. The earliest known printed reference to a club sandwich didn't appear until 1889 in a cookbook called The Good Housekeeping Everyday Cookbook. This suggests that regardless of where it was first assembled, the sandwich didn't achieve widespread fame until the very end of the 19th century, making its true origins even harder to pin down. It's entirely possible that the club sandwich, like so many iconic foods, wasn't the sudden brainchild of a single chef, but rather the natural evolution of a concept, a perfect storm of available ingredients and culinary trends. The double-decker sandwich was already popular, and the addition of crispy bacon and fresh tomato ingredients that were becoming more commonplace created a new standard. Its name may have simply been a brilliant marketing tool, a way for any restaurant or diner to lend an air of upper-class sophistication to a relatively simple menu item, making every customer feel like a member of the club. What's undeniable, however, is the sandwich's meteoric rise to become the undisputed king of American hotel and diner fare. Its appeal is a masterclass in balance and satisfaction. Every element plays a crucial role. The crisp, toasted bread provides structure and a warm crunch. The sliced turkey offers lean, savory protein. The bacon contributes a smoky, salty punch. The lettuce and tomato add an essential fresh, cool, and slightly acidic contrast, and the mayonnaise binds it all together with its creamy richness. The vertical construction is not just for show, it ensures that every single bite contains a perfect ratio of all these components. It's a self-contained meal that is both elegant and utterly satisfying, a fixture on room service menus and laminated diner menus from coast to coast, a timeless symbol of classic American comfort that continues to hold its own against any modern culinary trend. And there you have it, 33 slices of pure, unadulterated American culinary absurdity. From government-mandated buffets in Oklahoma and cheese that legally isn't cheese, to pies made of crackers and sandwiches born from poker games, it's been a wild ride through a landscape where creativity, misunderstanding, and sheer, unapologetic weirdness collide on the plate. We've seen how world wars changed the flavor of our snacks, how airport trays revolutionized our dinner routines, and how a simple misunderstanding of fractions sunk a better burger. Each fact is a reminder that American food culture isn't just about sustenance. It's an ongoing, chaotic, and often hilarious conversation between practicality and spectacle, between tradition and pure, unbridled innovation. This journey proves that behind every seemingly ordinary food in the grocery aisle, there's likely a hidden history of bizarre marketing, accidental invention, or cultural transformation just waiting to be uncovered. It's a testament to a national spirit that asks why not more often than why, a spirit that will happily bread and fry just about anything, create a museum for spiced ham, or convince an entire country that a blend of spices is actually the taste of a squash. This is the wonderfully weird heart of American eating, where nothing is ever quite as simple as it seems. So now we absolutely have to hear from you. Which of these 33 facts completely rewired your brain? Did the truth about the fortune cookie shock you the most, or was it the calculated chaos of the McRib's marketing? Maybe you're still wrapping your head around the legally allowed insect parts in your peanut butter. Share your favorite bizarre food fact in the comments below, whether it's another American oddity or a strange delicacy from your own corner of the world. Let's keep this celebration of culinary weirdness going. And if you enjoyed this trip down the rabbit hole of ridiculousness, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden stories behind the foods we love, because the menu of the strange is truly endless. Thanks for watching.